Hello again, everybody in the Palazzo podcast world. We are here again for another prospect show. This is Ben Chase, Big Gentle Ben, on all the social medias. And I am joined again by my man, Robbie Baseball. And we're going to talk to you about some of the movement that has gone on this offseason among prospects. And the best part, Robbie, is we kind of get to start off with there was a really kind of a big move today.
Absolutely, there was. Let's get into it. We kind of mentioned it on some social media things, and you're welcome to find us there, Palazzo Podcast, wherever the Instagrams and the X's of the world. The trade was the Cubs got a relief pitcher who we don't need to worry about for fantasy purposes, a veteran player who, was on the 40-man and whatever. And they got a legit prospect in Michael Busch. And the Dodgers did some dreaming, and the Cubs were willing to part with what I think are a couple of very high ceiling prospects. One who everybody probably knew about before, and another one who everyone will now have on their FYPD draft boards. An 11th round pick from this year's draft. So, Ben, do you want to discuss the Cubby side?
Yeah. And, Almonte is Almonte. I don't even think he's a guy, if you're in a save hold or in a holds league, he's probably not that kind of a guy. He's going to be a sixth, seventh inning guy. He's just, mid 90s throws his slider 50% of the time. He's just kind of he's a reliever in today's game. He's
going to stream onto your 30-man roster, your 30-team rosters if things go well for him this year. Yeah. Otherwise, he's not even rostered in that league. That size of league. So really irrelevant outside of something crazy happening.
But the guy you need to know about is Michael Busch, who they've already I've seen two different guys I trust with the Cubs put out already that Busch will be their first baseman. And that is really interesting to me because he's got some defensive versatility. He is he's a legit third baseman. He can handle second base. The guy was a first base outfield type when he got drafted, but he's more than that. Always has been a better athlete than you would think. I mean, he's 6'3", like 215. So, he looks the part of an athletic guy, but he can swing it from the left side, takes walks. This is kind of a decent 3-2 outcome type of a guy that really, the funny part is he fits a Max Muncy type of mold with maybe even a little better contact. But the problem is, and he might be even a little better than Max Muncy defensively, but the Dodgers already have the proven asset in Max Muncy. So why give time to the guy who could be Max Muncy and has that mold? And so it makes a ton of sense for them to make this deal. But I really like Busch in Wrigley Field. I think that's going to be a good fit for him. He's a Minnesota kid who then went to North Carolina, but he's coming back to the upper Midwest. He's played ball in cold weather in his life. He knows he's going to be able to handle April and September in Chicago. That's one thing you hear about for people. That's not going to be an issue for him. I do love the duality of the fact that his divisional rival is going to be the Milwaukee Brewers with the last name Busch, and then he also gets to see St. Louis as well. So, you have the Brewers and you have, someone playing or a team playing at Busch Stadium. Come on. Just the stories write themselves.
Absolutely. The title of this podcast we were arguing about, because I said, why can't we call it Dodgers Shave Busch, add hope for this season? And you said that's inappropriate. And I thought about another one. I thought about, because on the Dodgers side, they now have Ferris and Bueller. The story writes itself. But yeah, I honestly, I love this move for Busch. Most importantly, for everybody who rosters him, I love this move for Busch. What I don't like the move for is what I think is actually going to happen. And that's that Nick Madrigal, who shouldn't be pegged as the Cubs third baseman, and Christopher Morel, who shouldn't be pegged as like an infielder type. He should be, your left fielder DH guy. they're going to lose at bats because Patrick Wisdom needs to play somewhere. And if they do decide to do this with Busch, where they actually put him at either corner, like it honestly, it doesn't matter for total at bats between that like herd of players.
Yep.
It's going to hurt the fantasy value of all of them. I think except Busch, because he didn't have value prior to this deal for 2024 because it was very uncertain. As you nailed the analysis with Muncy, like you've got the guy and you've got Vargas also, who like the Dodgers are really trying to force Vargas to be this like super patient hitter. It wasn't working for so many MLB at bats, but they're still trying to get that done with him. And clearly he's their preferred project over the Michael Busch. Plus they can always churn out useful MLB outfielders. James Outman was the most recent one from last year. I was pegging him off in 2021, picked him up in a couple 2022 drafts, cashed in 2023. And then I did trade him in one important to me league this offseason, just because I didn't know exactly what the Dodgers were going to do, but I did believe there was a way to get that value out because you don't know what the Dodgers are always going to make their lineup look like, right? And then you certainly don't trust Dave Roberts to be making normal, rational decisions. So I like the move for Busch, but the rest of the guys with the Cubs, it hurts their value a little bit. In just total potential fantasy value. If we see a corresponding move where like Madrigal or Morel leave or do something, I'll be interested in that. But I don't think that's going to be the focus. If we saw anything or learned anything last year from Matt Mervis, they're not going to give a position to a prospect. He will need to earn it. So that's the only good thing I can see from this is that Busch, even though like Fangraphs has already thrown him on as the starting or opening day first baseman, they like to do those things, first to hit it. But at the same time, we still have spring training to go. And it could be interesting if there was some way of like Mervis and Busch second half of this season could start to really take over the at-bats between first base and DH. We don't know. Somebody might want Patrick Wisdom. I'm sure the Cubs won't want too much for him. I think he's got 2 years left, like this season and one more of control. He's aging, not that he's terrible, but like you can move him third base, first base, left field. But again, like he's a 2 true outcome guy. He doesn't have that walk down to the point that I would say 3. So,
yep. And that's so. I mean, getting to the Dodgers side on this now, Robbie. I mean, we talked about Ferris this last week in our when we were talking about the Cubs, and a very, very impressive young pitcher. I mean, certainly, it's the type of guy that I think that Tulsa rotation had a lot of last year. So Absolutely. It's a guy that the Dodgers can do well with, a guy whose stuff is really loud and just needs to learn to control it. And I think in Tulsa last year, they figured out where a lot of guys were going to go, whether it was rotation or bullpen. And that time in AA allowed them to decide that. And they, like I said, there are a lot of profiles very similar to his in that AA rotation last year. So I think that's about the best fit that you could ask for if you're a Ferris owner right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's only 3 organizations, I think, in all of Major League Baseball that you can genuinely be excited to have a pitcher be part of, and it's Tampa Bay. And I'll be honest, I think that's a little fictitious. It's more bluster than it is genuine results, and I can get to a little case of that shortly. It's Cleveland, because they find a way to max out whatever a pitcher can throw. They'll work real hard to figure that out. And the Dodgers proof in the pudding last year. And as you said, with AA, they sorted stuff out, but they've been developing fantasy relevant pitchers. And that's what I'm going to stick with versus like MLB relevant, whatever. They can get guys that can help you out that you want to roster in your leagues. And I think, Jackson Ferris we mentioned before, over slot second round pick and pitched very well. Go back and listen to that podcast. The Dodgers are just a good spot to go when you're getting closer to finishing, or not finishing, when you're progressing through, because they seem to have a system in place. And I mean, I think he's 6'4", and like he was a high school drafted guy, a lefty. Like this could be, we're going to try to make Clayton Kershaw out of you. Obviously everybody wants to make Clayton Kershaw, but here's a team who's done it, right? And then when you get into Zahir Hope, the 18-year-old, I think he's just about to become an 18-year-old Dodger outfielder, 11th round pick. In the 10th through 20th rounds, the most you're supposed to pay a player is $150,000. Everything, and I know you know this, Ben. I'm talking to the audience on this one. Everything over 150 comes off of your bonus pool the following year. Well, the Cubs felt strongly enough to get him to pay him $250 over, which means that they're going to lose that $250K in next year's draft, and he's gone.
Yep.
He's gone to get them a first, third baseman in Michael Busch, and they're happy to pay that. But for Hope here, like, he's in a great organization to go into for development. And again, as I mentioned with James Outman and other outfielders, they produce these guys. Like, they find a way to make a fantasy relevant, and for the sake of this as a human being, an MLB player out of you. And if they know they've got this guy, I think that they're going to, really hope that he can develop properly.
Now, here's what I find absolutely hilarious. I do a FYPD ranking for a top 100 FYPD ranking for Rotoballer. And so I was asking around a little bit on Hope. And I had somebody who flat out said that he's really a lot like James Outman. And now he's in the Dodger system, which I think is just, that is a perfect, he's an incredibly athletic guy. Sometimes those guys are Jaron Kendall and come in and they just can't make the contact. He's a guy who I think he's going to be a high walk, high strikeout type of guy, but he's also a guy with speed and power. Yeah. And, that his complex looked amazing, but I think he was advanced beyond complex, really. It just didn't get into full season ball. This year's going to be a big step for him. And then obviously for any player, AA is kind of that next big step for him. But it's going to be very interesting to watch him this year because, like I said, I think he's going to be a guy that you might see 100 walks and 100 strikeouts in the minor league season, but he's going to very potentially do 2020 all the way up too.
Yeah, which would be amazing. And like you said, AA is the first time they get a real big adjustment. And I like to think that that's a time that you can turn a lot of OBP kings into, jesters at that point, because a lot of the guys all of a sudden are like, oh no, off speed that moves, or something is doing it what it did not before, right? Because they only run into a few highly touted pitchers every so often, because those guys aren't going out, those hopeful future rotation guys, they're not getting 6 innings when they're going out at low level. No, they're getting 4 to 5, and that's later in the year. You had mentioned before when we were just chit-chatting about one of the minor league players that was getting built up, and you said his plan was by the end, this is back to 2020 shortened season, the plan was, as the season went on, to get up to be a 6-inning guy. Well, you got to get up there, right? And in the minor leagues, they're not trying to get you there out of the gate. And some of the managers have mandates of, we need X number of innings from these guys, so they don't care if they're in first or second. I remember a long time ago when I think it was, oh my goodness, the Lansing Lugnuts were the minor A team for the Jays, and they had Marcus Stroman, Thor. No, it wasn't Stroman. It was Nicolino, who ended up going in a trade and didn't do much. Justin Nicolino, Thor, and Aaron Sanchez, and it was like their big three. And they were giving the two guys, I think, 4 innings, and then the next one went in for 4 more innings. And however they rotated through, because again, that's what can happen at the minor league level. So it's harder to judge those things, but on the outfield side here, for Hope specifically, like, I love it. The problem that I think now is that he's going to get drafted like he's Evan Carter, because a lot of people are going to start to like do the dive that we're doing, but people are going to hear it and they're going to think he's a superstar. Far from it. Like, you don't get picked in the 11th round and take $400,000 if you could have been picked in the first and got $4 million. There's a reason that he wasn't picked this. It doesn't mean he won't work out. But I just don't want everyone to go and think, okay, he's going to definitely be, a top 30 pick, and he's the second best high school outfielder off the board. Like, don't get crazy with it, but start to consider him now, or depending on your league, put him on your watch list. And like Ben said, watch to see what that year is. Is he striking out as much as he's walking? Because that's okay. I'll take that. But if he's striking out 3 times as much as he's walking, then that's really going to hurt his development further on. Because you love speed, you love power, but there's that like terrifying thing that a hitter is going to start to chase a pitch and all of a sudden that average is going to drop, and then their coaches are going to get in to fix one issue, and they're taking away from what the player actually can do well, because they're like, we know you can hit for power, but right now we're going to get you to, you know, flatten out your swing and do this and do that, and all of a sudden they're screwed, you know. And if you don't believe me, just look at Colby Rasmus. That's a great example of somebody who was constantly chasing an adjustment in his career, and when he got it right, he still found a way to tinker with it when he started to, you know, have a little ebb and flow in the season. And that guy lost it as much as he had it, but he could have been so much good for so much longer if he had just been kind of left to sort it out. Instead, he was a tinkering machine.
Jason Hayward, another one who's tinkered from day one. And that rookie year, if he holds on to the guy he was his rookie year, which was uber elite defensive right fielder, plus a guy who could hit 20, steal 20, get on base at a 350 plus clip. I mean, if he holds on to that and has 10 years of that, we're starting to talk about, is this guy a potential Hall of Famer? And instead, here he is this year re-signing with the Dodgers as kind of a bit piece. And now it looks like he's kind of going to be in a very crowded outfield, frankly, with the Dodgers. But I mean, that's really what that tinkering, even with a superstar talent like Hayward was, can just completely derail a guy, which stinks.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's what we don't want for Hope. But it is absolutely a reason. Yeah. It is absolutely a reason not to think to yourself just because of the trade and the information. And like, we're speaking very positively of him because he has yet to do anything that raises our suspicion, but that doesn't mean that he jumps 250 spots in a dynasty ranking or something like that, simply because we found out about him. We knew about him before. We were basically ignoring him because we want to see what he could do. You know, some guys just need professional at bats. Like, I always look to see who signs over slot. I find it fascinating and I follow them. J2 guys are also interesting like that. Who had any type of report on them and then assigned for only $10,000? Why? What happened? You know, because there's information that we don't get because we're not in that environment. We're, fantasy baseball guys. You know, we're not out on the diamond talking to everybody and getting in people's ears. But this is how we can, go about finding our information. So, that's that trade, which was fun and exciting. As you said, Ben, we wanted to go back through. Did you have anything else on that one?
No, I was going to say, this is some stuff that I covered previously with Sam back in the day. It was Sam and I went through kind of the Rule 5 a little bit, but I think this will be really good to hear Robbie's take now on some of the Rule 5 and 40-man stuff. And Robbie, I'll let you go, and I'll kind of sit back and just join in whenever I hear something I'd like to throw my 2 cents on. So
okay. So historically, I would do with Ty from Dingers, we would do a pre-Rule 5 podcast, all the guys that we thought were going to get picked. And then we would do a post-Rule 5 and talk about how stupid all the teams were that didn't pick the players that we thought they should have picked, and then talk about who they did pick and whether they had some fantasy relevance. So we did not get to do that this year. So I had said to Ben, would this be okay? And here we are. So this is it. So the first pick last year or whatever in this past draft, there were only 9 guys. I only want to talk about 6 of them. Mitch Spence is one to me that's very interesting because he's going to Oakland, and there's absolutely no reason why you would take him as a legitimate starter and then put him into the bullpen unless you think to yourself, we have something special in his arsenal that is, closer worthy. Because what's the point otherwise? So I think he should start. And if he doesn't start initially, I think he should be in the plans to be starting at some point very early in the year, like before we get to the second half of May. Otherwise, you should just return him because that's a wasted pick. He's ready to start. This is kind of, a do or die situation where your first pick in the Rule 5 doesn't need to be a good one. Look at Jose Soriano, who's now 4 years, I think, after the Pirates picked him first in the Rule 5 draft, back with the Angels, and now somewhat of a legitimate relief pitcher for fantasy purposes, depending on your league depth, of course. Matt Sauer is one of the other ones. Could be a starter long-term. Garrett Whitlock would be my comparable as far as like caution yourself. Whitlock seemed like an interesting pick when Boston made him from the Yankees, and then he turned out to have a lot of injury issues that he previously hadn't had. Now Whitlock's like a mid to 7th inning rotation, bullpen type piece. So with Sauer, if you have him, I wouldn't trade him. I mean, you just found money because you didn't know he was going to get into any action this year, but I wouldn't be getting crazy trading for him, looking to do any of that stuff. Anthony Molina, same situation with Colorado. The problem is that he's in Colorado and they've already done what a lot of desperate teams do midseason, which is sign, the Dakota Hudsons of the world. They're taking guys who could have a reasonable season in a big ballpark. It's just that the Colorado, Coors is not the right park to be doing that in. You need movement on your pitches because the park is going to already mitigate some of that movement. So I don't know if Molina has some type of incredible out pitch to him, but again, he's going to be like the mop up dude, I think, essentially. And I'm hoping that Colorado's very smart with the pitchers they bring into their system. They have reasons that they get the guys in because they need them to do things to get outs. But I don't know that Molina is going to get much success at all. Shane Drohan, who for some reason I couldn't put all the letters in his last name together before we got on. I think he's an interesting case with the White Sox because he'll be in the bullpen. And there's guys like Garrett Crochet who have been through the ringer, who's also a left-hander, who could be discussing some of the ways in which you can get outs. And I think that's interesting. That's something, and Crochet's no old man in this at all. Crochet is trying aggressively this season to prove to the organization that drafted him and put him in their major league lineup year one that he should be in their rotation. And he's going to need to prove it all year long and go 80 plus innings to be able to do that. And there could be, a thing that Shane here could learn from that. And we could see a surprise out of that one. Washington's got Nazem Nunez as a shortstop. Oh, sorry, Ben, you muted yourself. What's up?
Yeah, Drohan is one that I want to just. Yeah. We're gonna get into the White Sox here this coming week.
Mm-hmm.
But that team, the way they've set things up, for one, I think they acquired a back end of the rotation from the Braves for Aaron Bummer, which I think is just, Nick Soroka.
Weird.
And
it's so weird.
It was like 4 different guys that they put in that trade that I'm like, God, each one of those guys would make sense for a team to think of as a 6th starter, and so now they have got a whole bunch of 6 starter types.
Yeah, like
is what they really have.
Which again, I guess former Brave at that point, right? So what is it? Whatever. We don't need to pull it up for this one. But it's a solid stack of garbage that you don't like. There's someone in one of your dynasty leagues that's got 3 of these guys, and they will not let them go because they're like, no, this guy's going to hit this year. And I understand that. I still have an affinity for Brent Honeywell, who is in that system and is a lefty and could be talking to Drohan being like, listen, man, let me talk to you about how to throw a screwball. No, we won't hurt his potential fantasy stock with that. But anyway, Nunez with Washington, I think, is an interesting case because Washington's proven 2 years that they're willing to have guys up who they think can be defense first and develop with the bat. And that's Nunez. That is who he is. There's no reason that he wouldn't get taken, to get back to his team unless they think that Garcia is now a lock and the rest of that infield is set, which of course it's not. You even got guys like Carter Kieboom who look like they were on their way out and the organization didn't even want them, who all of a sudden got time and was like, hey, look, I'm not complete trash. I'm, I could be a guy, right? Like, coach me up. But with Nunez, I'm looking at him to be potentially in Wednesday games and definitely in Sunday games. And I'm not joking when I say that. When you get into situations where managers try to pace out their year, they're going to want the young guys to play the first series of the week. And then they're going to want the guys to have Sundays off. That's, you play a day game, or sorry, Friday could be a night game. Saturday could be a midday or a night game. And then you've got a day game on Sunday. If you go night, day, that's when you're going to see Nunez with the Nats. If he's doing anything at all with the bat, if he can take a walk, if he can lean in and get hit by a pitch, whatever, I think that's where Nunez's value is going to be, is your deep league bench guy, 100% flyer.
Yep.
And then the only other one that I thought was kind of interesting from the Rule 5 is, I'm going to pronounce it incorrectly, Davison de los Santos. Say that properly, would you? You know,
Well, I think you're close enough. It's De
okay.
Los Santos.
De Los Santos.
We know we got the last name right.
Well, you know what? Even better, Didi Los Santos. So to pick a guy who's like a corner infielder, we'll call him that. So, third baseman, but you don't need a third baseman. So first baseman, who you acquired a former Tampa Bay Ray to potentially become your first baseman. Gabriel Arias is getting play at first base because they'll just take the D in Cleveland. I don't know what we're going to see. I could see him getting returned. I could also see a weird Akil Baddoo situation where they're like, okay, the opposition's going to throw you fastballs. Just try to murder them. Let's see what happens. And we might have somebody who looks like they're hot out the gate. But other than that, the other few picks I'm not going to worry about mentioning. And then on the minor league side, because when you get inappropriate excitement over, deep league guys, you love fantasy baseball. And that's what happens to me. I look at the minor league section of the Rule 5 draft, and I see that Kansas City with the first pick took Joe Gray, who we once thought was going to be a future Milwaukee outfielder. Not that he was going to be amazing, but he did the classic stall out. Pedro Leon's currently doing it with Houston, where they're good. They get to a level, they can't exceed it. They can't, beat the level, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And whether the organization decides to push them through or not, this is the potential fallout. And that's Joe Gray. The biggest name from all of the minor league Rule 5 is Seth Beer, formerly with the Diamondbacks. He was like a top 35 guy on fantasy lists, multiple fantasy baseball prospecty guys were like, Seth Beer, hit tool. They'll find a place for him to play. Fun fact, Ben, not every major league team's going to find a place for someone to play if they can't hit. Anyway, Pittsburgh, now that's him. And Pittsburgh did an interesting thing. They got Rowdy Tellez as well. They just picked up some guys to be their first baseman. And it really pisses me off because Mason Martin, once upon a time, was going to be their future outfield first base guy. He was going to fit in somewhere. And I think it was 2021. He had a pretty good season, like a 25 dinger season, and then took a step back in 22, or maybe plateau 22, like I described Pedro Leon. And then last year was not a great year for him either. So Seth Beer could still come up, but again, we need to see something else. If they could make a second DH, and if that guy could just start on first and then they could get a pinch runner in, Seth Beer might have a spot in Major League Baseball.
So, okay. With Seth Beer, do you remember why Seth Beer originally came into everyone's consciousness?
I honestly thought it was just that he had a great hit tool and everyone was like, this guy is going to be able to hit, but there's more than that.
Yeah. He was a stud as a freshman at Clemson. Just beat the ever-living snot out of the ball, which of course then you have the last name Beer,
right? Yeah, everybody easy to remember.
It just worked. Looking ahead to this year and the 2024 draft, I am concerned, to say the least, with Tommy White of LSU.
Yeah, also in Pittsburgh now.
I'm sorry.
I was thinking Lonnie White.
Yeah, no.
Okay, Tommy White. Sorry, yet to be drafted.
He's third base, first base type of guy, but came onto the scene like gangbusters when he was with North Carolina State as a freshman, and just kind of has a bad body at 6 foot, 230 pounds, and just. My guy, I watch him, and it reminds me a ton of Beer. And so This isn't throwing shade at Tommy White, but be wary of him if you're in someone who happens to have an August FYPD, for instance. That could be a guy who might get overdrafted just because he's gonna probably hit another 25 bombs again this year in college, and I think he's. If I remember right, I think he now has something like 60 or more bombs as a college player at this point.
Okay.
So 51 bombs in 2 years, which, that's pretty stinking legit. When you're you hit 27 as a freshman and hit 24. He drove in 105 runs last year in 66 games.
That guy gets penciled in. You're you're looking at him for the draft year for sure.
Yeah, and I'm certain he's going to be like a first round talent that people are going to look at that way. But there's a lot of beer involved in that. Well,
Maybe
there is.
Maybe there literally is a lot of beer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so.
Well, that's good. So that's, just another name. And then we'll get to reference back to Seth Beer as a historical person of note when it comes to this guy can hit really well, but he doesn't have a position thing, which I think is becoming less and less possible. Because I know when the universal DH came in, everyone's like, oh yeah, so that's just going to like increase different non-athletic players, but very few teams are actually doing that where they're like, this is the DH. Of course you've got Ohtani's of the world, but like, Nelson Cruz couldn't find himself a place to play consistently. And Encarnacion lost his role as one of those types of guys too. And that was playing with American League teams. So it's not a DH is not a position that usually gets a contract. It's baseball player gets a contract. They can also, be in a DH spot. We're going to see what the Mariners do this year with their Garver and Raleigh combo on that end. So the last two prospects that I had in the minor league side, Ryan Fitzgerald with Kansas City. And this is someone who I personally happened to catch in AAA when he was hit like on a heater. And he doesn't have anything outstanding when you look at year-end totals. Last year, he had a 268, 348, 491 line, which is okay. But when you look at the actual counting stats, you got 12 dingers, 11 stolen bases. That's not really, making anybody too excited. And tack on the fact the guy's 29 years old. So now he's going to be playing this year at 30, but he's with KC. He's a second base type. And I just thought he was going to get a shot with Boston when they sucked. And for some reason, I think it was he wasn't on the 40-man. For some reason, they didn't do it. They weren't willing to bring him up. As I've seen other guys, they've come up for like 3-5 days, and then they're DFA'd. So anyway, they lost him. It's just me. It's just me on this one. And then the final one is John Doak. Friggin' names. Okay, Doxakis.
Oh, Doxakis.
Yes. I would.
No, I just know him because I've dealt with him.
Okay, so
Doxakis.
Johnny D, as I will now call him, who will pitch from the left side in his age 25 year coming up. What a fun pick. So this is what I've written because I was so excited. 6'4", a 2019 second round pick from a team with a great reputation at developing, and then in brackets, but it's false, to a team that helps pitchers. So he went from Tampa Bay to Cleveland. He's going to reach his full potential with the Guardians. He might play in 2024 he's going to start in AAA, I'm assuming, which is where he finished last year. And I'm assuming back in the rotation, which he did not do last year, but I think that was Tampa Bay trying to think, how can we max him out? Because every year prior, he was a starter. And I believe when he was drafted, he was in a Tommy John recovery year in 19. So he really kind of burnt that 1 year, or Tampa Bay, whatever, burnt that 1 year of having him recover. So he's got 4 pitches, and his worst pitch is the fastball, which would normally scare me if it wasn't for the fact that he went to Cleveland, who will be like, let's talk about those 3 other pitches. And, if he can make anything that's currently average into plus that isn't seen that way, I think the changeup is the one that is his best pitch. But if he can just get something going with that, if the starting isn't going to be the reason Cleveland keeps him, they're probably going to move him into the pen and do the whole, we think it's going to, the velo is going to tick up thing. And maybe that fastball could become a little better for him. If there's one team that can take a broken player, if you want to say that he's broken,
a pitcher
especially, and fix him, it's Cleveland. Now, Thor arrived last year and it did not go well. I think there were some issues with Thor prior to ever arriving that he thought he's going to get, something's going to help to tweak him or whatever. He's not right. But this is not the same guy, right? This isn't a $17 million player. This is a guy on last legs of potentially becoming a professional minor leaguer. And he's going to listen to whoever is coaching him. And I think this could be a real steal in the minor league draft. So that was my last guy.
Hey, Doxakis coming out of college.
I wish I knew how to pronounce that.
But I coming out of college, I really liked him because he was weird, but he repeated it. Alex Wood is a guy that I remember when he first came up with the Braves, everyone said, oh, the guy's going to blow out his elbow. He's so herky-jerky, does all this goofy stuff. Now, he did end up eventually having Tommy John surgery. He had already had Tommy John surgery, so now he's a 2-time guy. But the guy's had I want to say he's pitched over 1,000 ball games at this point in his major league career. Alex Wood has, which, that tells you he's done something right to be healthy enough to pitch 1,000 major league ball games. Doxakis looked a lot to me like that, like had a really goofy type of delivery that made it tough to pick up his pitches, and made the fastball play up, made the other stuff play up, especially when he was locating. And the Rays tried to smooth that out. And to me, that is just, unless there is a specific reason why it's hurting the guy, trying to completely redo his delivery after drafting him in the second round.
Right.
Seems
You
like
picked the
really
player.
Rough decision.
Yeah. You picked the player because of what he did. And then you're like, what we're going to do? You know what made you successful? I got this great idea. Let's just change it. Let's change that thing and then make you into a professional pitcher in our organization. And again, that's why I don't fully believe the hype that everybody gives to Tampa prospects. And I mean, there are guys going back to infielder like Joey Wendell, who everyone's like, who the hell is this guy? Joey Wendell's a rookie of the year, blah, 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 like our candidate, like one of these guys who they're like, wow, the Rays are so good. They can make anybody into, a useful fantasy player. No. They can make you think that they're going to be useful. And then you just get pissed off for 4 years trying to figure out what in the hell happened that first year when you all of a sudden acquired him in a deal or, higher in a draft or whatever it is, that he became someone on your roster. And you're like, wait a second, now the guy's 32 and in Miami. Like, how did this happen? And you can get into, oh my goodness, umpteen prospects that are, coming to mind right now that I thought were going to do something in Tampa. And then the big thing was all the time coming up with Wander Franco was, well, there's no point in being excited about any possible shortstop because Wander Franco will get that job at some point in time, which he did. Like, he did.
Yeah.
But kids will be kids, and he's gone now.
Oh,
that's as comfortable as I was to go with that one. As comfortable as I was.
Oh,
and he's gone. But now you're looking at Tampa Bay, and you're like, well, what are they going to do? So they make a trade with the Mariners to, they gave up Luke Raley, who I think is a fantastic example of a Tampa Bay who the hell is that guy player. He wasn't owned in any league or rostered in any leagues last year. He was a super hot guy as the year went on because all of a sudden he went from, oh, he's like doing okay. They got matchups. They got this, they got that. No. I think he had 3 position eligibility by the time the year ended last year. And he carried over in one of my leagues. I think it's right field is his outfield position. That was the primary, and first base carried over. Now with Seattle, he's not going to do that, but he's going to be outfield, and he's not going to be part of the platoon. Like Haniger's going to end up in a platoon. I don't think Raley will. So it's going to be really interesting to see what that comes. But the shortstop that came back in that deal is going to now be Tampa Bay shortstop, whether they can work some magic or they're just trying to figure out what in the hell's going on with Wander for this year. I don't know. But Tampa Bay's pushed a bunch of guys up. Vidal Brujan's another one, right? He was a super hot topic. Plus all of, all those pitchers they pushed up, they didn't do the next level of development outside of, a guy like Wander Franco, who was good. Right. He was good. He came up and was supposed to be a game changer, and he wasn't. He was good. And then he was a little bit, he was just, he was progressing, of course. But we haven't seen that with their other studs. So I'm glad to see, how do I pronounce the last name?
Doxakis.
Doxakis. Oh my gosh. I need to know that name. Doxakis. I'm glad to see him go. And I'm glad to see him go to Cleveland. So I'm going to write down Doxakis.
So, since I last did kind of a we did our first big 3 one. Since the last time I did anything other than that, which was kind of when I went through Rule 5 and such, there have been a few guys that have moved around in the minor leagues that are, I guess, I don't even know if our first one we're going to talk about here is technically still a prospect. I'd have to even look to see, but he just intrigued the hell out of me. Braylon Marquez with the Cubs, with his delivery, which is kind of low 3/4, and he gets such interesting movement on his pitches because of that. I always loved him as a minor league prospect with the Cubs. I will admit that there is somewhere where I have listed him as the number 1 Cubs prospect at some point.
Yeah, but he's had his time in the sun.
Yeah. Blew out his arm and worked his way back and just kept running into crap. And some of it was his own doing, but that's a whole nother discussion. He got moved to the bullpen this last year, and the Cubs tried to start stretching him out through the bullpen. And I happened to catch his final game against Rocket City, which, by the way,
the Trash Pandas. Oh, what a great name. Oh my God, I love it.
And their merchandising is absolutely amazing as well with it. So, I mean,
I bet
just perfect.
That's how I found Trey Cabbage was the best name of a minor leaguer on the team with the best minor league name. Like Trey Cabbage on the Trash Pandas.
And Marquez has struggled with his location, but in that game, he had maybe a handful of pitches over a 3-inning outing where they didn't go exactly where he wanted them to. And when he can do that from that arm angle, he's still got a fastball, slider, curve. And from that arm angle, that curve, it feels like it's jumping up above where the trajectory should be in order to drop down, which is such a mind screw for any player who's trying to hit that ball, because you see it come from that, low 3/4 angle, and it has hop and then drops, and it's just wait a minute, like how am I supposed to hit that? But so the Astros do things with guys like this, and he has signed a minor league deal with Houston, and I think that's a really good spot for him to be. I don't know if he'll ever turn out to be a starter, but this is a guy who could come in and could work from the left side in that bullpen. And I mean, look at what they've done with guys like Stanek, the Rays kind of used him as an opener that would sometimes go 2 innings, and he was never put in anything useful. And now he's their like 8th inning guy in Houston. And, I think Marquez has that type of ability to where he could flex into, I could throw you 2 innings today. And then the next day go out, or not the next day, but the next time out, go out and pick up a hold as the 8th inning guy. And that's a really valuable arm if you're patient with it and allow him to get that control where it needs to be. I don't know. He's a guy that I've always liked, and watching him at the end of the year, he got better and better as the year went on. His final numbers in AA looked terrible, but his last month of the year, I think he allowed 2 earned runs over like 4 appearances or something like that. So it got significantly better as he went on through the year. So,
yeah, Marquez has definitely been somebody who people just would not trade because of the potential. Like Dynasty owners, no thanks. I'm doing the old wait and see on this guy. We want to know what we've got. There are a million other players on this list who I would never even consider doing that. They would be throw-ins in trades, but that's exactly how you end up getting burned in Dynasty, is you don't go and like have another look. Or as I always tell people, if you're not sure about a player, just YouTube their name and see how they pitched in college. Or if you can find them at, AA, whatever, just watch 1 minute of them and you'll get a pretty good idea of who looks like they're dominating and who look, especially if you can watch an outing where they're not doing the best. That's very nice.
Yeah.
If you can do that. So right-handed pitcher Cole Phillips was traded from the Braves to the Mariners. Now, I know you're the Braves guy, Ben. So what do you think? Good riddance or, oh no?
I don't know. We haven't seen him. The Braves picked him in the 2nd round, the same draft where they got Owen Murphy and they got J.R. Ritchie. I mean, it was a draft where they went hard after high schoolers, but he had Tommy John surgery, but he was one of the huge hype guys that year. He was touching 100, but he was sitting mid-90s pretty comfortable every time out until the elbow popped. Now, I can't tell you what that's going to be like when he finally comes back, because the Braves long played his recovery this year, and so he never touched a professional mound this year, which means we haven't seen him pitch yet. He was a 2022 draftee, haven't seen him pitch, but he was included in the deal that brought Kelenic to Atlanta. He was the prospect return that the Mariners got, along with Jackson Kowar, but that's a whole nother discussion. But Phillips is the type of arm, I will say, his reputation is very similar to, like, before he got hurt, is very similar to Prelander Berroa. And Seattle's still trying to figure out what the heck to do with Prelander Berroa, but that's the type of big arm you could potentially have here. You know,
All right.
very
So
likely,
yeah, certainly not somebody to get rid of. And going to Seattle, I think, is a plus. Not that leaving Atlanta's the plus, but just being, going to Seattle's good because they've been able to turn prospects into pitchers, which they haven't been able to do, as I mentioned on the one podcast, as middle infielders. They can't bring up their own in that regard. But they've got that. A more prospect involved trade was right-handed pitcher Greg Weisert, right-handed pitcher Richard Fitz, and right-handed pitcher Nicholas Judas to the Sox from the Yankees, and that was the Verdugo trade. So we don't care about Verdugo tonight. But I care about Richard Fitz, as I'd mentioned to you earlier. I thought he was very interesting this year. I had him on a queue in a draft league in August, the drafts, and he got picked in front of me. And I think I had taken Houston's Rhett Kuba after that. And I thought I got burned losing Fitz. And then a couple people had mentioned to me, oh man, I was really thinking of Kuba, but he got promoted and didn't have that one good start. And I think he's going to get eaten alive. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting way to look at, one start for one player. And then I was looking at Fitz and I was thinking, I think Fitz, could be a Yankee. But now with the Sox, I think that's even more or an MLBer. I think that's even more of a guaranteed thing. And this is a legitimate starter. You can call him the back of the rotation guy. He's not going to be your fantasy ace, but he could certainly be in your lineup. Your points leagues, you're going to be okay with him. Obviously, the Red Sox being good would help that out. You're losing points for losses, so it's going to help if you're getting wins. But Fitz is like a reliable looking starter. I don't know if you would say he was the best of that return, but I felt like he was, to me, he was my favorite.
Yeah,
of the three.
He was definitely, absolutely. And is it Weisener? Is that the first one?
Yeah.
I'm okay. He's already kind of passed he has passed his prospect eligibility, but regardless, I think he's just kind of a reliever. He is what he is, nothing huge. The guy, Judas, to me is interesting only because he's 6'8". He can touch 97, 98 with the fastball and has a really a hard depth slider that can get two planes on it. But he didn't get drafted, or he didn't pitch at all after he got drafted this summer. He was an 8th round pick, which, there's a reason a guy goes in the 8th round. He is a reliever only. All through college, he was a reliever only. So this is a guy you can maybe dream on because of, like I said, that 6'8" frame, and with the already present stuff. But I don't know that I see it.
Do you remember the name? And I can't, which is why I'm asking, or I just say it. The name of the last Red Sox that was drafted, and they're like, this guy is going to be, Craig Kimbrell. This is our next closer. And I cannot for the life of me remember this guy's name now. It was a college guy. I forget if it was like 8th round or earlier, but whatever his name, I'm feeling like this was like 2019 maybe. And people were like, he's going to be up and he's going to be so good. And this is the type of guy. And maybe this is like not an organizational guy, but this is the type of guy that Red Sox fans will be like, this guy is going to murder people because he's huge. Like you said, 6'8", 230. Oh gosh, what the hell is that guy's name? I'm going to look. I know for sure a Red Sox fan or two that I'm in a dynasty league with.
They're all screaming right now at the.
He'll still be rostering this guy's dumbass, and they're like, "You'll see, Rob." But I know he wasn't up in the bullpen with the team last year. And I feel like it was like
wasn't
a Brandon.
John.
No.
Chris Murphy?
No, that doesn't sound right. Nothing better than staring at a list trying to remember.
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
Talk about your dynamite content. Well, he could even be out of the organization right now. He could have went to Japan. Yeah, I'll circle back to this when we get to Boston for sure, when we start to do the prospects. But he's the example that I give on, if you think a guy out of college is a relief pitcher, just don't bother, because there's nothing worse than putting high draft capital into, go draft some guy that signed over slot that's, you know, a high schooler later in a draft, you know, like a hope type player. Do that instead, because if you want someone closer to, you know, the pros, it's still not a guarantee if they were in college. And like, he wasn't killing it either. It's not like we saw, you know, 18K per per nine or anything silly like that. So it's somewhat muted. So next one up was Carlos Mateo, traded from the Astros to the Royals for Dylan Coleman. I mean, I'm not too excited on either guy, right? These are just dudes.
You're talking, I mean, Coleman's got his stuff in the majors, and Astros might be able to find another gear. I mean, quite frankly, Coleman isn't that much different than where Ryan Presley was when Ryan went over from the Twins to the Astros, but he had already started that next step. Coleman really hasn't. Coleman needs to take that next step, but he has the present stuff. He just hasn't taken the step to actually make it useful. And which is why they got a DSL kid. You know, he's a DSL kid, really fun, raw stuff, but that's all you can say about him. I mean, you don't know. He's never pitched in Momentot for the complex yet. So we got to see. I only know that he's got a really big fastball. That's all. I have not heard a single thing about any breaking pitch that he owns. So, you know, the next trade is.
I found the player. I found the player from the Red Sox I was talking about, and he's been released, which is why we didn't see him. The Red Sox released Durbin Feltman. That was the relief pitcher.
Yep.
Since reaching AAA in 2021, Feltman's put up less than impressive 5.97 ERA and a 1.35 WHIP over 75 and a third innings. Third round pick out of 2018. So it was, man, that's how far back I was going for that one. But like, that is vivid fantasy memories of this guy is going to be a closer. I'm drafting in my first year player draft as a closer. So he's 26 right now. Anyway, sorry. That's what my brain's up to today. So yeah, go on to the Soto trade, because I'm excited.
Yeah. And this is one that I've covered in a few places already. Your Johnny Brito and Michael King, they're both non-prospects technically, if you want to get into that.
We don't care about them for the sake of this podcast.
For this podcast, Randy Vasquez, he did come up a little bit and got some time. Didn't look terrible. Didn't look great. But I think that's really who Randy Vasquez is. He's not going to look terrible. He's not really going to look great. I think he's the perfect guy that you stick in the number 4 or 5 spot of your rotation, and he doesn't kill you, but he probably doesn't force you to put him into the number 3 role. You know what I mean? And that's honestly, those guys are valuable. They are very valuable to a team because you can pay them right now, you know, $750,000 and do that rather than going out and having to spend $10 million for the same production from a veteran.
Exactly. And hope that the veteran doesn't take a step down from what they've done. You know, I watched the Blue Jays 4 or 5 years in a row. I watched the Blue Jays give a veteran $10+ million and get next to nothing out of them. Whereas with Vasquez, I think you're not necessarily you're not necessarily banking on upside or something to change, but you're okay with it. And from fantasy perspective, like points league, you roster this guy, you put him on your bench when he's doing okay or the matchup looks okay. Sure. You know, when he's going to Colorado for the weekend series, no thanks. But, you know, you find times in which he can be useful to you, but you don't build around a Vasquez like you would, you know, Soto on the other side, obviously. Yeah. Well, and the rest, Thorpe, I'm not nearly as excited by, but it's interesting. You know, sometimes guys just need to leave the organization.
Yeah, and that's just it. I think my write up here, what I had written down here, Thorpe has back end stuff, but his approach and his control on the mound allow him to have it play up to potential mid rotation stuff.
Okay,
I mean I really liked watching when his numbers got crazy last year. I was like, what is this guy doing? Because when I watched him the year before, it was like, okay, this guy's got probably a legit double plus changeup, but really everything else is average. So how is this guy going to ever be? How is he doing what he's doing? And I thought, well, it's got to be A ball, right? Well, then he was still doing it in Double A, and so I took some time to watch him, and he's aggressive on the mound. I really, really like the changeup, and he's aggressive on the mound. Like it's once again, that's a back rotation starter profile, and certainly he could fill that out very well for San Diego by the end of the year if he continues to have the success that he did last year. But let's see. He's also the type that I think a lot of people are going to overhype because he led the minors in strikeouts last year. And, so they're going to see that type of a number on a guy and go, ooh, if he can strike out guys at that level, we'll just wait till he gets to, San Diego. And
Yeah.
no, that's no. But
it's funny how the Yankees have a reputation of hyping prospects. And depending on, the circles you're listening to, they do a very good job of trading guys who don't end up becoming, what people thought. I'm thinking of Stowers that went to Texas. There was there was a trade to Texas with Joey Gallo. That's the trade I'm talking about specifically, of the more recent case of it. But it's not a thing where the park benefits one type of, a hitter or pitcher that they have in the minors that does it. It's just, the Jays used to do it with Vegas players. The hitters went there. The pitchers all stayed at AA New Hampshire, a different park. They learned the cold weather, whatever. The pitchers learned the grind, whereas the hitters got to go and have a great time. And it's almost like the Yankees have a version of that where they can help themselves out with certain players that are, in Scranton or wherever they're sending guys, that they can make a player look better that they might not think is there for their future, especially because they're such a free agent based builder. Of all the teams, they're the ones who you would bank on moving a prospect to get, a Juan Soto type. So this makes perfect sense. And for San Diego, it's one of those coach them ups, right? Well, we can coach them up to maintain. We can coach them up to do whatever. And let's just hope that we can get something out of this, because that Soto trade from Washington is going to look real ugly in 3 years if they don't have anything back, which is possible right now with that trade they made. So,
well, and the Yankees here, you talk about how the Yankees utilize their guys as assets in trades. You're talking about here 2 outfielders that they acquired for 8 pitchers, 7 or 8 pitchers, regardless. Like that's you're dumping a heck of a lot of guys who are like at the precipice or actually in the major leagues, and you're just dumping them off to other teams and getting in pieces that you actually need, which is, that's the worst owner in your fantasy league that can go out and dump out his minor league system and get a useful piece in the majors. And everyone's like, don't ever trade with that guy because we get hated.
There are some guys that are called serial traders in fantasy leagues where they're like, they'll trade a prospect for a prospect all day long. And that's fine, right? Like that's a 1-for-1. The guys that win your leagues are the ones who are trading away what you may perceive to be decent talent and getting back someone that you're like, I don't know how useful that guy they got back is. And then it turns out that they're kind of banking it up to make that big, Juan Soto trade, or they're getting themselves ready to add all those pieces. So then you look at their roster and you're like, well, it doesn't look that dominant. Like, how the hell have they been in, the finals 2 years in a row? How have they done that? And it's because they're the ones who are not blowing it up. They're the ones who are just churning it out, right? Like they're getting prospects, they get to a point, they move them, and then you've got MLB organizations doing the exact same thing. Because depending on how leagues have free agency, dynasty leagues and whatever have free agency, you can put yourself in a great position every offseason to not panic in your league's free agency or in your universal draft, however you do it. You're not drafting veterans to fill out your lineup because you have those guys. You're drafting prospects, and then in 2 years you trade those prospects for other veterans on other teams, and you just keep it going and keep it going. And it's like this smooth act that the best do it. And it starts at the MLB level when you don't have to go and sign a big, and the Yankees aren't the example of don't sign a guy, but when you don't have to go and get everyone on your roster as a free agent and bring them in, you can trade for players and increase your window. Like the Cardinals did it for years, right? It was like, oh, the Cardinals window is about to close. Oh, never mind. Okay, the Cardinals window is about to, oh no, never mind. And then the Cardinals are always in it. That's the kind of thing in your dynasty leagues. Those are the scariest owners out there. Like this guy's been in the playoffs 4 years in a row, and his team looks better now than it did the first year he made it in. Like those are the scary guys. And that's what the Yankees, sadly, might be back to now. They haven't been dominant, but when you look at that lineup on paper, it never looks bad,
Yeah. But here's the team that actually does seem to do that at the major league level, where they can just pull a guy off a scrap heap and turn him into something. And I'm actually going to move, if you go on the list I sent to you, Robbie, I'm going to actually talk about 2 guys together because they're both Dodgers minor league free agent signings, and they're both outfielders. and they were both once hyped fairly well. So I think they both kind of fit. Lolo Sanchez, who was a top 100 guy with the Pirates, and just holy crap athleticism at one point. And
Under a
then
different name, I think, right? He was he always Lolo?
He Lolo
I feel like
is
he
always
had a name change.
Yeah, Lolo has always been his nickname, and I think for a long time he was going by his full name, and then just kind of gave
went
in.
to Lolo. Okay, so that's what it is. Okay, sorry,
But,
I didn't mean to cut you off. It's just
no,
I was confusing myself. So
then the
Lolo
other one
Sanchez?
is former early draft pick Austin Beck, who of the A's, and both of those guys signed with the Dodgers. Now, if folks don't remember, Max Muncy was a release at the end of spring training by the A's that the Dodgers picked up. And everyone says, oh, yeah, the Dodgers just made him into what he was right away. He spent an entire year in AAA becoming who he is now, and then came up, and from that point on has been that guy in the majors. But they took a guy who they saw had already present talent but had nowhere to be in Oakland. These guys have already present talent. Both of them are heckishly good athletes. Beck just missed a whole season due to a torn ACL in his final year before minor league free agency, so it really kind of kicked him in the butt. And then Sanchez has fought for, I think, pretty much since COVID to stay healthy. And so these are both guys who at one point were on top 100 lists and have the legit background talent, but it'll be very interesting to see if they go to Los Angeles and we see something coming out of that AAA squad this year involving either one of them really putting it together.
Yeah, like their stat lines for both guys, you just don't care. It does not look good for 2 years. And Beck, you only have 21 and 20. I think it was 23, or was it all last year he sat out? I just got rid of him to go look at
all of last year. Yep.
Okay, so it was so 21, 22, and neither line was good, but 22 was like serviceable. But you didn't see high steals, you didn't see a lot of dingers, and that was probably at bat related. The other guy is another Dodger that I was quickly going to check on, which was again going back to talk about your hyped guys out of the draft, Trey Sweeney. Now with the Dodgers, like Trey Sweeney was a first-year player draft darling. He was moving up. Where was he drafted overall in that one? I
want to say it was second round. Oh, hey, Lolo Sanchez,
20th.
Kevin Brian Sanchez.
Oh, okay. So it was a different name initially. Yeah. Okay.
But he was always like, people knew him as Lolo. I had to look that up because you brought that up, but I was like, it's not something that normally would translate to Lolo. That's why I was like,
definitely. As soon as I saw Lolo, I'm like, oh, that's the guy that had a different name before. I remember that. But yeah, so when you look at Sweeney, and like it doesn't look terrible. AA last year for basically full season, just under 400 at bats, 13 dingers, but again 7 stolen bases, and that's not what you're expecting from him. But a 252, so it was 367, 411 slug. So he's not exciting at AA when he's 23. Like that's basically the age at 23.
Yeah.
At the age of AA. But you want to be good at that age. You don't want to be a 24-year-old dominating AA, because then you're old for the age. Even though you're really, you're within whatever half a year of the normal or the average. So Sweeney's stock has went down. But again, like going to the Dodgers just intrigues me more than if he would have stayed with the Yankees and continued. So I like that move.
I make this one very much. I wouldn't put Trey Sweeney's future at short, but he can handle it. He shouldn't be starting for a major league team there. But the guy that it reminded me a ton of when he came over to the Dodgers is Chris Taylor. And look at what they've done with Chris Taylor. He was a shortstop. Yeah. He was a pretty highly regarded shortstop prospect, and just kind of bombed out as a actual defensive shortstop. But now he plays some shortstop, plays a lot of outfield, but he's just he does his thing and makes it work. And gosh, what the Dodgers are just about the perfect organization for Sweeney. But in that deal, I think the Yankees got a good one too in Yorbit Vivas.
Yes.
I really like him as I don't know that he should play anywhere but second base in the infield. But at second base, he's actually a pretty darn good defender. He doesn't quite have the arm for third, doesn't quite have the range for short, but at second, he's pretty solid. And he's just one of those guys, he doesn't do anything elite, but he does everything well.
Yeah, I mean, he's an OBP guy for me. Like he last year, what was he? Just about even walks for Ks, 69 walks, 71 Ks. I mean, I love that. But when you pair that up with only 13 dingers, then yeah, like you said, you're dropping off your value a bit there. And again, if you're going to limit it to second base, I mean, you got to fill out a fantasy lineup as much as you do a major league lineup. So if he moves around a little bit, which could have been a Dodger thing, might not be a Yankee thing. I don't see him not becoming a major league player at some point in time. Like I think he'll at least have the opportunity this year to get some at bats if he continues. If he goes straight to AAA this year and stays in camp for a long time so that they can get a good look at him. Right. He could be one of those May type call up guys. Not that. Like either way, I like that trade because that trade allows this conversation to take place where you're like, well, neither prospect is dead from this trade. It actually could work out because there's viable windows within the depth chart of their organizations now. So
then I've got two guys who are kind of one pitch superstars. Max Laser, who was with the Brewers and now signed a minor
hell of a
deal
name
with the Phillies. Yeah, great name.
Like obviously a bullpen arm,
elite changeup guy, but you watch him, he can manipulate the ball. He feels when you watch him when he was with the Brewers, I thought, oh God, they got another Brent Suter. That's just, I mean, that's really who he felt like on the mound. And so I don't know that there's, you have to be pretty darn good as Brent Suter to make it as Brent Suter. I mean, it takes a particular level of control and everything else to do that. I don't know if there's a role like that. I mean, gosh, if you think of the Phillies bullpen, you think of holy crap stuff. You don't think of a guy who's doing Brent Suter things, but maybe they see that, that could be useful for us to have somebody who can eat 3 innings and not have to make Jeff Hoffman go out and grab 2 innings for us and save him so he can pitch four times each week.
Right.
The other guy is Blaine Enlow. He was a Twin draftee at the time, considered the best curveball in that year's entire draft, and still has that kind of a curveball. Everyone kind of hoped that the 91 would become 94, 95, and it never really has. So he's got a hell of a curveball. They put him into the bullpen for the first time this last year, but then used him in multiple innings a lot. And I think if you get the Giants don't do anything really special with a pitcher, but they take what you do well and they have you do it a hell of a lot. And that's where they've had success with guys like Gausman. When he went there, they said, oh, you throw a split finger like nobody else in the game. How about you throw that 30% of the time and let's see what that does for you? He's almost a Cy Young winner. That seems like it was maybe a good idea. Hey, Carlos Rodon, you have a sweeper slider that, is something you use rarely, but it's one of the best in the league. How about you use that more often with us? Now he's winning a Cy Young, and going into free agency and making himself a ton of money. I don't know that Enlow's going to ever start for the Giants, but I think that they could make him a useful middle inning type of piece. And he's just not been able to cross over that threshold so far with the Twins. And so just two guys that I thought, 1 inning or 1 pitch type of guys, but the type of pitch that it's so stinking good that they could have a future role in a bullpen, but probably not in any relevance fantasy wise, but just someone to know. You never know where those type of guys might come in handy.
Yeah. League dependent, right? Your league dependent. You just need to know about the existence of these players. And as you said, if a team decides, hey, this is your pitch, you're going to throw it a lot, or if you're the hitter, this is what you need to do when you're in the box, all of a sudden we could see not necessarily a new skill set of, higher K per 9 or more power as a hitter, but success that they had at previous levels returning because they're going back to that what was once their bread and butter. I don't want to talk about Ronaldo Hernandez to the D-backs because he's a catcher. I think just stating that is enough. Is there anybody else on our list to catch us up that you think is worthy of mention here?
Coleman Crow, to me, is he was traded to the Mets when the Angels were still trying to go for it midseason. And then the Mets decided to use him in a trade. And I think the Mets ended up acquiring a more expensive version of Coleman Crow, which is just kind of silly because Coleman Crow, he's small. He's only 6 foot, and that might be giving him an inch or two in height. And he's labeled as having 4 pitches. It's really more like 6. He can move his changeup in 2 different ways. And then everyone talks about, it's one of my laments with fantasy write-ups on a pitcher when they mention fastball and call it one pitch, and he has 2 very distinctly different fastballs. And he does. Crow can throw his 4-seam and his 2-seam in 2 very different ways. But it's very, very similar to Adrian Hauser. Like the overall pitch mix, the way he looks on the mound, the way he goes about it. And I thought, if there's an organization that can do something with that, it's probably the Brewers. Crow missed a lot of last year after being injured. But yeah, I mean, it seems like he's in the perfect organization to utilize what he does as a starter. And not a lot of organizations will still allow you to do that, not be a guy who can throw 95. And I think that's a guy we could be looking at 2 years, 3 years down the road as a guy who's pulling off Wade Miley type stats.
God, I hate Wade Miley.
You watch him and you're like, how does this guy have success? But he's with the Brewers and they seem to know what to do with that type of guy.
There was a September though, Ben. Like I don't know if it was 2019. I think it was 2019. Wade Miley had 2 starts in September, so in like fantasy playoffs, where he lasted like a third of an inning and maybe 1 inning, and completely blew. And that was a 2-start week, and completely blew like my finals in my home league.
It was,
and I will forever hate Wade Miley. Like that was.
I'm pulling this up here.
Traumatized. The mention of the name just immediately hurt my feelings.
That month.
Yeah, he was horrible.
5 starts for Houston that month. He pitched 11 1/3 total innings. A 16 ERA.
Bring that into your fantasy playoffs.
With 7 walks and 6 strikeouts. But here's the shit of it. He only allowed 2 home runs. He gave up 21 earned runs. It wasn't like he was getting beat out of the ballpark. He gave up 21 earned runs, and
they were hitting him around
on home run.
Yeah, they were just hitting him around.
But it was nuts.
It was like I said, it was very upsetting, and I just hate Wade Miley, and now I hate Wade Miley comparisons. So if you immediately want to get me off course, just say, that guy really reminds me of a Wade Miley type, and then I'm done. I'm done. If you didn't have any other guys to mention, I wanted to just quickly mention some of the 40-man roster moves that happened last month. And then anybody that we've already talked about, the first guy I'm going to mention on the previous podcast. So hopefully everyone's listened to that one. So guys who got up to their 40-man prior to the Rule 5 draft, who I thought were worth mentioning because I think it's a positive for their career. Arizona had Christian Robinson, who we talked about. Cincinnati moved up Christian Roa, starting pitcher. Cleveland moved up Tanner Burns, a former first-round pick, starting pitcher.
Like that one.
Yeah, that one to me, I'm watching because not all the Cleveland first round draft pick pitchers turn out, and Burns kind of was going down that path, but he's on the 40-man now. We'll see. Houston had a slew of them that I had some interest in. Justin Dearden, an outfielder, Zach Daniels, an outfielder, Shea Whitcomb, an infielder, potential shortstop type. And then I'm going to call it Jaime, but it's probably Jamie Melendez, and it doesn't matter because that's just what I'm doing. Melendez was Melendez was a repeater at Double-A, but great K to 9, and he looks good on the mound. I was very interested in him a year ago, and the fact he didn't go to Triple-A disappointed me a bit, but I thought, you know what? Houston had like Brandon Bielak and a bunch of guys just kind of rotate in AAA MLB, and maybe they didn't want to move him Melendez into that. They wanted him to just pitch. You go do this and pitch, and you're going to go do that. He's 22. I think he'll play this year at 23, and this could be. I'm assuming this will be a year he goes to AAA. This could be his MLB. He is going to be 22 this year.
His September birthday, so he'll be.
Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah. So he'll pitch at 20, which is incredible to think he's already had 2 years with AA experience. The White Sox added Wilfred Veras. I thought he was a third baseman, but he was listed when I looked again at outfield. So, which is a little more disappointing to me, but this is like a 2020 guy, young as well. I think he'll play this year at 23. They also added Matthew Thompson, who's a right-handed pitcher. Another interesting one. Colorado, it's interesting. It's not interesting. Aaron Schunk, middle infielder. He's on. We'll talk about Colorado on the next one. So it's fun. Jeremiah Jackson, former Los Angeles Angels future shortstop, now absolutely pooched with the Mets because he's got to move to the outfield because, you're not breaking in to take over Lindor's job. And that's, it's going to be an interesting one. And Justin Jarvis was also added from the Mets. The Yankees had 2 guys, Elijah Dunham, who I quite liked out of his draft. I don't know if he was 20. I think he was drafted 21 and added on. Either way, it doesn't matter. He's on the 40 man now, which means he's going to come up this year. Jared Cerna's the other guy, second base shortstop with the Yankees. Oakland added Logan Davidson, who's a former first round pick and was doing okay last year. I think he could just have 300 at bats this year and no one will notice, unless he takes off for some reason. Alberto Rodriguez with the Mariners is an interesting one. He's a former Blue Jay, J2, who had a good year 3 years ago, I think. And Dynasty owners have been just crossing their fingers that that's coming back. So he's now on the 40 man, which, doesn't help his value because the stat line hasn't been there, but it does increase the odds that he's actually going to get some MLB time. And then this is less surprising, but the Rockies had also added, I'm going to say this wrong, I'm sure, Yanquiel Fernandez, who was like he's a top 100
He's got
guy.
a great nickname. I got to figure.
Thank goodness, because I don't want to have to pronounce his first name. Tell me it's Lolo. Tell me it's Lolo. Or Yaya. He could be Yaya Fernandez.
I was just going to see, because I know he's got a great, oh my gosh. Of course, Baseball Reference doesn't have it yet. What the heck?
Yeah, but anyway, those are the guys who I saw last month make moves up that I was excited at. I do roster several of these guys in different dynasty leagues. Dunham was one that went to I think he was drafted and went to the fall league the next year or something. And I was like, oh, that's very promising. And then the Yankees restuffed the outfield. So I was like, okay, he's not coming up. But this year, again, I'm going to say it, this could be the year. You could have Judge, Dunham and Soto. That would be an interesting outfield for a weekend series in some type of hitter friendly park. We'll see what happens. It was more important to me to see some of the names get up because that meant the teams cared about them. When we talk about Colorado prospects, I've got a guy who I think is probably their best talent prospect who was not put on their 40 man. That's my teaser for the Colorado episode. Was he should have been put on and been protected from the Rule 5, and he was not, but no other MLB team was willing to take a chance on him, which happened to, oh my goodness, what was the Blue Jays had a catcher they drafted in the first round a long time ago. When he was Rule 5 eligible, I think he was contemplating quitting baseball. They didn't bring him up. I don't think he got into AAA. But anyway, they had a guy, again, another reason to hate catchers, who didn't amount to jack squat, made a couple $1 million on the signing bonus. But yeah, you got to watch these guys. And when they get on the 40 man, that's kind of the next step when you're kind of figuring out, should they be part of my future, right? Some of the guys are 25 when they finally make it on. Some of the guys are, as we said, 22. And those are the best ones to find. It's like they're young, they're not highly rostered. If you go and look at Fantrax, you'll see, Jamie Melendez does not have like 30% ownership, which means all the dynasty leagues have drafted right now, or, they're settled. All the redraft leagues, which knock those numbers down, they don't exist yet. That's one of the things with Fantrax is same with Yahoo right now, only dynasty leagues and keeper hold leagues are going to have rosters active. So if you go and look today, and then you go and look on April 5th, you'll see a big drop in a lot of the percentage of ownership for guys because all the redraft leagues have come in and really knocked numbers down. So typically if a dynasty league If you see a guy owned in 20% of leagues, that means he's owned in all your dynasty leagues. But in all of the redraft, through just however it works out with Fantrax, the numbers come way down, which I've also noticed Fantrax has added ADP to their stat list for players, which I think is an excellent addition. And immediately people give value to that. So if you happen to have somebody that you're not a big fan of and you're like, oh, their ADP is 840, who are other comparable guys with a similar ADP? Maybe I can try to trade someone with a comparable ADP, which is someone trying to get rid of, roughly equal assets at this point, but you got to look long-term and think, who could be the guy that'll last for 5 years? This guy might last for 2. So anywho.
And so, I mean, that 40-man stuff, we're entering the time of year when that makes a big, big difference, because we will get to the end of March. Teams will be making roster decisions and they're going to go, well, crap. If we bring up this guy, we're going to have to cut somebody from the 40-man, but we can bring up this guy over here who's maybe not quite as good, but plays all the same positions and can fill out the bench, and he's already on the 40. Let's give him a shot for at least a month. And especially in season when they get to, oh, geez, we just lost a pitcher. We need someone to come in and make a spot start. You rarely see the top pitching prospect that happens to be at AA but isn't on the 40-man roster get that call. It's almost always somebody who is on the 40-man already that gets that phone call and gets to come up and make a spot start for you. So knowing those 40-man things are pretty darn important as the season gets close. I know we've got some folks who really seem to think Jackson Holliday is coming up and he is going to start day one with the Baltimore Orioles. Jackson Holliday is not on their 40-man. Now, I'm not telling you that means he won't make the opening day roster for the Orioles, but basically it means that unless he is going to be their day one, 6-day-a-week starter, they aren't bringing him up. Because honestly, I think if they thought that he was right now going to be that guy coming out of spring training, you'd see them working a Jackson Chourio deal with him.
Yeah, or trying their best to do that.
Or at least trying to, yeah.
Holiday, because of his father, I think would be one of the few players who would be like, no, thanks. You know, but doesn't mean we wouldn't hear a report of the agent saying they're trying to get something done before opening day, just to plant that seed out there. Because as I've been learning this offseason, agents rule the world and agents rule the rumor mill, and they completely screw all of us regular Joes over, because they can talk to two different sources as they become a source, but they talk to two of their sources who then spread the rumors. And that's how you get Ohtani on a flight to Toronto. When it turns out he's just looking if he's going to change his address in LA or not, or just stay in the same place.
That was, I've honestly, one of the best gag gifts that I saw. I don't know do you know the Effectively Wild podcast?
Oh my God. That's how I found out about Ohtani.
Okay.
Mike, I love that podcast.
So Ben Lindbergh, the host, he ended up drawing, he does the Secret Santa every year, participates as the host, which I love the fact that he participates in like the Facebook group stuff as the host of the podcast. But he ended up assigned to a guy from Toronto. And being the Shohei guy that Ben is, he got the guy a jersey with the flight number. With the flight number on it.
And it just turned out to be one of the guys from Dragon's Den.
Yeah.
Shark Tank in the States, but Dragon's Den is the Canadian version that we've got.
I just thought, oh my gosh, that is absolutely amazing to have that kind of and the guy took it well. It'd be one thing if you gave that to a Blue Jays fan that was like, F you. But I mean, I think but the best part is going to be,
I'm just showing now on the live stream. Go to YouTube Palazzo Podcast, 1 hour 24 minutes in, and you'll see the thing that I want to get framed, which is a child crying opening a Blue Jay Ohtani jersey at Christmas, and the parents both behind laughing. It's just some AI thing that they drew up, but oh my God, it made me laugh so hard when I saw that.
And I mean, that's just, I think Ohtani is one of those guys that's just going to be so much fun. But yeah, that whole system with the whole like
Yeah, it's the agents.
going to Toronto, it's absolutely agents. And
Yeah.
they're the guys, some of them are out there trying to do what's absolute best for their guys. Other guys are out there trying to make sure that they get the next best guy. They are trying to do a deal that gets somebody else to go, ooh, I think I want to work with that agent on my contract because they just got this guy this. Which, I mean, Ohtani's contract might not attract anybody to that agent. And that's what honestly what I love is the fact that he said, you know what? I don't care. I'm going to get the money as the agent no matter what. Let's structure this thing to where you got to pay out like 680 million of it in the, after he's done playing. Sounds like a hell of an idea to me. I still get my money, and so he doesn't care. And so quite frankly, probably making him a darn good bit of money or a good bit of financial security, and so yeah, I don't know that many other players are going to want to do quite that. And so it might not be the type of deal that attracts somebody to go to an agent, but it sure puts his name on the map.
Yeah, I've already heard in several of my Dynasty leagues that have contracts where people have made the joke, but I'm sure someone's a little serious about it. How do we figure out how we're going to defer money for free agency in the future? And I'm like, good Lord, we're not bringing that into fantasy baseball.
No.
God,
no.
You got your serial traders in leagues. You got your guys that attack the new guy when they come into your league, trade all your crap to the new guy for his diamonds. And then, you've got guys like us trying to police it, trying to help you out and say, hey, be careful of this, look into this guy. And we'll continue to do that all off season. So,
yeah. Well, I think Robbie, we're coming up on an hour and a half talking together, and that's
this one's shorter than the first one. So
there we go. We're making strides. But I think, folks, we're all caught up now, really, on your off-season stuff that matters, and that's really kind of the big deal. Is the prospect stuff that really mattered from the off-season, you're caught up on, and so now you can just focus on all of these fun lists and fun team-centered shows that we're going to do the rest of the way. Well, that and we're working on bringing on some fun guests that could talk about stuff that goes on in the game, and that's, I think, always a fun piece of it. And so if you have somebody you'd love to see us bring on, find us on Discord, reach out to us on Twitter, let us know, because we'd love to have guests on to talk baseball, because hey, we're sitting here 90 minutes in talking baseball, and I think, Robbie, you'll echo this, that if we wanted to, we could probably go another 90 minutes just talking baseball and not really be hurting. So
absolutely, this is what I live to do. It's snowing outside right now. I've got an Ocho Cinco jersey just to trigger anybody that might get upset by it behind me, but I am always thinking baseball. So this just gets me excited to go upstairs and kind of relax and watch a little bit of TV. And I'm also just going to start scrolling through depth charts and just like, I don't recognize that name, and I don't and that's just what I love to do that. And I love to take that information and bring it and share it. So that's why I'm happy to be here with you, Ben. Now I've got a new home to share that info, and ideally not just make myself and my teams better, but make everybody who listens, make their fantasy teams a little better too.
Amen. Well, that's all we've got for you guys today. We ask you to subscribe on the YouTube channel and give us a like there. Come find us on Discord, find us on Patreon, find Robbie or myself on the social medias. If you want to go on what used to be known as Twitter, or you'll find us.
Pay in the Patreon, get yourself into the Discord. That's the best way to get our attention. And if you're interested in a first-year player draft, mock draft, if you're interested in a prospects draft, so are we. We want to see that excitement from you guys, that you'll be, with us. Maybe you'll participate in it. Just let us know.
Because we got fun stuff that we could be doing, especially if we do this right. We're going to have 2 full weeks before opening day to play with. Yeah. So who's to say we couldn't do our own Discord, Patreon, first year player draft, and bring on all of you guys to help participate in it. Who says that we couldn't do a big prospect draft, prospects only type of draft, and have plenty of our Discord and Patreon folks join us? There's lots of fun ideas we can do here, folks. Let us know what you'd love to see. But most of all, like I said, subscribe, find us on Patreon, find us on Discord, and we will chat with you again next week when we're going to be talking about 3 more ball clubs and deciding who their best prospects are and the next 3 guys you should really kind of know about. So for Robbie, I'm Ben. So long, folks.